talk today about Surah Al-Ankabut, the end of Surah Al-Ankabut, and Surah Ar-Rum, and then if we have some of Luqman, if we have time. Surah Al-Ankabut is revealed towards the end of the Meccan period. And so, like other Meccan surahs, it deals with a lot of issues of faith, Quran, miracles, who is Allah, Jannah hereafter. It also deals with hijrah. And so we'll talk about that shortly. But I want to mention a few verses that come before the verses that talk about preparing for hijrah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, وَمَا كُنْتَ تَتْلُو مِنْ قَبْلِهِ مِنْ كِتَابِي وَلَا تَخُتُّهُ بِيَمِينِكَ ذَلَّ ارْتَابَ الْمُبْطِلُونَ. Allah tells the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, you never wrote a book before this, nor did you ever read anything. You never read a book, you never wrote anything before this. Had you have done that, the people who wanted to cancel you would have found something to find doubt about. Because they would say, oh, well, he read this, he read these stories, he's just putting this together with that and everything. So clearly, Allah is saying, this book is a miracle from Allah. The most amazing combination of letters the world has ever seen has come from someone who's what? Unlettered. Right? This is clearly a sign that this is a miracle from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's also another fa'idah here. Ali Shariati, he says in his book, The Sociology of Islam, Allah purposely kept the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam unmolded throughout his life. You know, the things that mold you in your life, number one, is what you read. The books that you read, the education that you come across, right? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam never read anything, and he never had an education. He never went to school. He was never molded in that sense. The things that mold you is like your father, right? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam never had a father. He was never molded in that sense. His mother even died when he was very young. He wasn't really molded in that sense either. His personality wasn't molded. Your city tends to mold you in your personality. The Prophet ﷺ, he was raised on the outskirts of the city, right? By Halima Sa'diyah and her clan, right? So that tends, and you know, he didn't have an education, he couldn't read and write, he wasn't molded. Allah did that on purpose so that he can receive the Quran the way it was. And not impose his own mold, his own personality, his own thoughts upon it. He received it as it was, and he exemplified it as it was. كَانَ قُرْآنًا يَمْشِي عَلَى الْأَرْضِ. He was a walking Quran on the earth. But it's not enough for the disbelievers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says after this, He says, بَلْ هُوَ آيَاتٌ بَيِّنَاتٌ فِي صُدُورِ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمِ. It is clear signs in the hearts of people who have knowledge, right? Because these people, the Muslims who have knowledge, they see with the light of Iman, their heart sees it for what it is, and that's all the ayat bayinat they need, right? But yet the disbelievers, they say, وَقَالُوا لَوْلَا أُنزِلَ عَلَيْهِ آيَاتٌ مِّن رَبِّهِ. Why doesn't he have other signs sent to him? Why doesn't the earth split, or the sky split, or the sea split, or something that has... They want to see something, right? They want to see, like, you know, they can't hear? Oh, there's a request to reduce the talking noise because people can't hear. They want to see, it's like people say, you know, I gotta see it to believe it, right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَوَلَمْ يَكْفِهِمْ أَنَّ أَنزَلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابِ يُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ. They want to see it to believe it, but Allah says, it's enough that a book is sent down, يُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ. Now Ibn Ashur in his tafsir, he has a lot to say about this يُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ, right? They want to see something with their eyes. I gotta see it. Show me. I gotta see it to believe it. Allah says a book is revealed that is yutla alayhim, perpetually recited. Yutla fi'l mudari' yufidu al-istiqbal wal-istimrar. The fi'l mudari' form of a verb, it implies something is continuously happening. And Ibn Ashur, he says that is a much more powerful sign than just a one-time event. If you see something one time with your eyes, that's just for the people who see it there. But something that is often recited, it's passed on from generation to generation. It reaches every land. It reaches all people. So it's a much stronger sign. Also, something that you see with your eyes as a one-time event, as a miracle, is subject to accusations of sorcery. Oh, well, this must be magic or something like that. But that which is yutla alayhim, it's constantly recited. It's not subject to a magician trick. It's subject to reflection. It's subject to pondering. It's subject to contemplation. Also, that which happens one time and you see it with your eyes, okay? It's just a one-time event. You might forget about it later. But that which is yutla alayhim, often recited, it's like rain that comes down from the sky. It keeps coming down. It keeps coming down. And it allows your iman to grow. And so it is a much more powerful sign. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, shortly thereafter, Ya ibadiya alladhina amanu inna ardi wasi'a fa iyaya fa'budun. Allah is preparing the Muslims for hijrah. We said this verse, this surah was revealed towards the end of the Meccan period, and Allah is saying, "Oh my servants, my earth is spacious, so worship me alone." In other words, you have no excuse. If you're being persecuted, and you're being placed in a situation where you cannot worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have to leave that situation and find a place, as Abu Hanifa says, a place of aman and aman, so you can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with safety and security. So this is an obligation. But of course, when this is being recited, what's the first thing that the Sahaba in Mecca are going to think? I gotta leave, what about my wealth? I can't take my wealth with me. I can't take my home with me. I gotta sneak out. Like, it's gonna be hard to carry. What about, how am I gonna get provided? Where am I getting food? Where am I getting water? You know what Allah says shortly thereafter? وَكَأَيِّ مِن دَابَّةٍ لَا تَحْمِلُ رِزْقَ اللَّهِ وَكَأَيِّ مِن دَابَّةٍ في الأرض وكأي من دابة لا تحمل رزقها الله يرزقها وإياكم. How many of a creature is it? How many of a creature that walks on the earth is it? It doesn't carry its own risk on its back. Right? Allah provides for it. It wakes up in the morning, it doesn't know where it's going to get its risk from, but Allah provides for it. Like the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, لو توكلتم على الله حق توكله لرزقكم كما يرزق الطير. If you would put your trust in Allah, a trust that is due to Him, He will provide for you as He provides for the birds. Right? تَغْدُو خِصَامًا وَتَرُوحُ بِطَانًا. They go out in the morning with empty stomachs, they come back with their stomachs full. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, look, these animals, they don't know where they're going to get the risk from, I provide for them. You don't know where you're going to get your risk from, just make hijrah. I will provide for you as well. Allahu yabsutu rizqa liman yasha'u min ibadihi wa yaqdiru lah. Allah expands the risk for who He wants amongst His servants, and He contracts it for who He wants. Right? For them. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this towards the end of the surah. أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا أَنَّا جَعَلْنَا حَرَمًا آمِنًا وَيَتَخَطَّفُ النَّاسُ مِنْ حَوْلِهِمْ. Don't they see how we have provided a safe sanctuary for them? The haram, right? In Mecca, they were safe. No one fought because it was the haram. But the Arabian Peninsula was not a safe place. Anytime you made a trip, you were subject to be kidnapped. You were subject to have all your stuff stolen. It's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so Allah says, وَيَتَخَطَّفُ النَّاسُ مِنْ حَوْلِهِمْ. Everyone around you is being kidnapped. Everyone around you is being, but you're safe here. It's like Allah saying, do you see how I gave you safety and security here? Do you see how I provided that for you and you didn't even ask for it? You didn't even know where it came from? Make hijrah. I will give you your risk in a place where you don't even know where it's going to come from. Just like I gave you safety and security here, and you don't even know where that came from. Right? And in the midst of all these ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us, وَمَا هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا لَهْوٌ وَلَعِبٌ. This world and everything about it, you're worried about losing your wealth. This world and everything about it, it's just nonsense and play. وَإِنَّ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةَ لَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانِ. But the next life, that is hayawan. Now hayawan, what does that mean? That's from hayat, but there's more letters in it. It's mubalagha. There's a principle in the Arabic language that says ziyadatul mabna tadulu ala ziyadatil ma'na. The more letters in a word, the more meaning it tends to have. And what does this mean where Allah says wa inna darul akhirah hiya al hayawan? The next life is where the real life is. It means that's where more life is. There is more dimensions to life. There is more experience. Imagine, see, we live in 4 dimensions. Length, width, height, and time. Imagine you lived without height. And then suddenly you were transported to a world where there was height. You'd be like, oh my God, I wasn't even living before. Right? Jannah is hayawan. There is even more layers of life. There's more layers of experience. There's more layers of pleasure. There's more of everything in a way we could not even imagine. Right? So that is the end of Surah Al-Ankabut. Then we go into Surah Ar-Rum. In Surah Ar-Rum, even though we go one surah further, we're actually going back in time a little bit. The Meccan period again. But now Surah Ar-Rum is not revealed towards the end. Surah Ar-Rum is revealed around the 4th or 5th year of the Meccan period. And it's named after Rum. What's Rum? The Romans. Who are the Romans? The Byzantiums. Why is it named after this? Well, because the surah describes a geopolitical situation. And by the way, quick fact, this is the only place in the Quran where any geopolitical situation is referenced outside of the Arabian Peninsula. It references it, then makes a prediction. And for that, we need some background. At that time, there's 2 major superpowers in the world. Persia, right, and Byzantium. And they're constantly at war with one another. Byzantium is in control of places like Sham, Palestine, Syria, North Africa, Turkey. Persia's in places like Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, parts of Pakistan. They're at fighting. In the years between 602 and about 630, the wars were pretty intense. And, it's like the Meccans and the Muslims, they took sides. It's like any competition, like you pick a side kind of like. And of course the Muslims were rooting for Ahlul Kitab. The Meccans were rooting for the polytheists, the Zoroastrians, the Persians. Around 613, the fighting changes, the Persians gain an upper hand. There was a very famous Persian general Shahr Baraz, who took some land in Turkey, and then he won another battle in Syria. They took Syria, and then they took Palestine. They occupied Palestine. They took North Africa. Another Persian general, Shaheen, he fought a war in North Africa, Egypt. They took that too. They were in control of everything. It looked like Byzantium was about to crumble. If Byzantium was a stock, you would have said sell. Sell this stock. It's going to zero. Okay? That's what you would have said. It looked like the end of the empire, right? And here, when this is happening, the Meccans are coming to the Muslims and they're like, look, it looks like your Ahlul Kitab are being defeated by us fellow mushrikun. Right? And they begin to tease the Muslims. And it is in this context that Allah reveals Surah Ar-Rum. غُلِبَتِ الرُّوم Alif Lam Mim غُلِبَتِ الرُّوم فِي أَدْنَى الْأَرْضِ The Romans have been defeated in the closest part of the earth. Adna could mean lowest, that's one opinion, but it could also mean closest. Most likely in reference to Syria and Sham, because that was the closest land that they knew. That's the land they used to go and trade in all the time, right? So Persians had taken that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says this, and this is what's miraculous. وَهُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِ غَلَبِهِمْ سَيَغْلِبُونَ فِي بِدْعِ سِنِينَ But after this, they will become victorious in bid'ah sinin. What is bid'ah? Bid'ah is between 3 and 9 years. In other words, a few years, just give it a few years, these Byzantium, they will come back and now they will be victorious. Now why is this miraculous? Because who could have predicted that at that time when it looked like this empire was about to fall? This empire is about to crumble. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, just give it a few years, they're going to come back and they're going to gain the upper hand. Right? And this is exactly what happens. Because there's an up-and-coming general in Byzantium by the name of Heraclius. This is the same Heraclius that one day later, almost a decade later, is going to question Abu Sufyan about this man Muhammad. And Abu Sufyan is going to be forced to tell the truth about him. And this Heraclius is going to realize this is really a prophet. But before that, he's an up-and-coming general. And in a mountainous area in Turkey, around the year 622, he defeats the Persians. And it leads to a series of events capitulating in the Battle of Nineveh around the year 626, where the Persians are totally pulled back. They're totally pushed back all the way back to the place that they were before, right? No one could have predicted, and they gained the upper hand. Now Allah says, وَيَوْمَئِذٍ يَفْرَحُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ بِنَصْرِ اللَّهِ And on that day, the believers will rejoice by the victory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you know what essentially coincides with the turn of events of Byzantium beginning to gain the upper hand against the Persians? What happens, what event happens early on in Medina? Because there's something that coincides. Who knows what coincides with that? The Battle of Badr. And that is the day Allah says, and that day the believers will rejoice. And so what's happening here? Allah is essentially saying, look, these weakened Ahlul Kitab, they're being defeated by the mushrikun. They're being abused by the mushrikun. But they will come back and they will be victorious. And essentially Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Meccans here, you are weak and you are being abused by the mushrikun, but you just wait too. On that same day when they gain the upper hand, I'm going to give you the upper hand as well. And that's what happened in the Battle of Badr. Everything shifted. Right? يَنْصُرُ مَن يَشَاءُ وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ He helps who He wants, and He is the mighty and wise. وَعْدَ اللَّهِ It's Allah's promise. لَا يُخْلِفُ اللَّهُ وَعْدَهُ He does not break His promise. وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ But most of people don't know this. يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا What do they know? The superficial things about life. Everything that's superficial about life. They know the dunya for the sake of the dunya. وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ هُمْ غَافِلُونَ But when it comes to the next life, they don't know anything. And that's the point of knowing the dunya, is for it to be a sign that leads you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Now, these are called, when you know the dunya, when you understand when you know this world, when you know geology, you know science, you know medicine, you know astronomy, or you know psychology, whatever. These aren't blameworthy to know. It's not that these are, but they should be signs that point you to Allah. And when they do, previously at the end of Surah Al-Ankabut, we said, ayatun bayyinat fi suduri ladina utul ilm. Those are ayat nususiyya. Those are scriptural signs that the believers preserve in their hearts. But then, when it comes to learning about the dunya, Allah wants us to see ayat kawniyya. Allah wants us to see His ayat in the creation. And He tells us what these ayat are a little bit later. وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ in Surah Ar-Rum أَنْ خَلَقَكُم مِّن تُرَابٍ ثُمَّ إِذَا أَنْتُمْ بَشَرٌ تَنْتَشِرُونَ. From His signs is that He created you from clay. Suddenly you are a multitude of human beings spreading all over the earth. SubhanAllah, how amazing is that? How amazing is the reproduction cycle? How amazing is mitosis? How amazing is it that a drop of fluid from here and a drop of fluid from here can produce all the people here? SubhanAllah, it's a miracle, it's a sign, right? وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا. He created from yourself spouses, right? لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا. So you can find sakina in them. Where did sakina come from? Is there a genetic sequence for sakina? No. Is there a way to mutate evolutionarily speaking into sakina? وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. And He put between you love and mercy. What's the genetic code for love? There's no genetic code. It's something within your soul. Allah placed it there. That is a sign. These are obviously signs, right? وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافُ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْمَانِكُمْ. And from His signs is the creation of the heavens and earth, the differences in your complexion, the differences in your tongues, the differences in your languages. There's so many languages in the world. People understand each other in different ways. وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ مَنَامُكُمْ بِاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ وَابْتِغَاؤُكُمْ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. Your sleep is a sign. You go to death, you die, you wake up again, you go into another world. How does that happen? No one understands sleep. No one understands it. This is a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ يُرِيكُمُ الْبَرْقَ خَوْفًا وَطَمَعًا وَيُنَزِّلُ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً فَيُحْيِي بِهِ الْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ مَوْتِهَا. And from His signs is that He shows you thunder, He shows you lightning, He gives you fear and hope by virtue of it, and He sends down rain from the sky, reviving a dead earth. And these are all metaphors as well, so we understand the Quran is like that rain as well. It revises our dead hearts, right? And this is something that's mentioned throughout the Quran. Now, elsewhere, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then He tells us about the fitrah of human beings. And He tells us, like, how do you recognize these signs? Well, you need fitrah. You need natural disposition, right? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَأَقِمْ وَجَهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا. Establish yourself wholeheartedly. He says your face, but really that's your identity. Who you are wholeheartedly, He says, as a hanif. A hanif is someone who inclines towards the truth, away from falsehood, even if it means going against the grain. Even if everyone's going in one direction and it's all towards falsehood, the hanif is someone who goes towards the truth against the current, right? Then Allah says, فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. This is the fitrah that Allah has put humankind on. What is that fitrah? Your natural disposition to worship and recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for who He is. And to see all of these signs in the world as they are. That is the fitrah. And of course, shaitan wants to destroy this. He wants to corrupt this. He tells, وَلَا أُغَيِّرَنَّ خَلْقَ اللَّهِ. I'm going to change their creation. I'm going to change their fitrah. But this is why we have to maintain halal and avoid haram, because that is essentially what keeps us on our fitrah. I see that I'm out of town. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله فاستغفروا إنه كان غفارا. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us a better understanding of this. اللهم انفعنا بما قرأنا وجعلنا من الذين يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه. بارك الله فيكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.